Listen now, younglings, to a tale that has echoed through the void for 1,000 cycles. A legend from the before times, when the stars burned brighter and the great empire stretched its tendrils across the 17 sectors. This is no ordinary story, but one etched into the very fabric of our civilization. The tale of how the universe trembled before a human female with a tool of common metal. Gather close, for the telling is best heard in whispers, lest the ghosts of the vanquished take offense. The message arrived on a Tuesday, because of course it did. Tuesdays had always been humanity's collective disappointment, the interstellar equivalent of stepping in something wet while wearing socks. The massive Vexillian warship had appeared suddenly in Earth's orbit, its shadow falling over half the North American continent, triggering 17 different apocalypse cults and crashing the global stock market in under 4 minutes. Inhabitants of Earth, the transmission had boomed through every communication device on the planet simultaneously. The glorious Qith'xalanth Empire acknowledges your pitiful existence. You will submit one champion to face our warriors in the Grand Celtic Army. Failure means planetary extinction. You have 7 rotations to comply. The United Earth Coalition had immediately convened an emergency session. Military generals threw around terms like tactical nuclear response and orbital defense grid, while diplomats suggested sending gift baskets and proposing a cultural exchange program. Both approaches seemed equally useless against an empire that had reportedly turned 3 solar systems into asteroid fields as casual demonstrations of power. "What about our enhanced super soldiers?" asked General Blackwood, still clinging to the belief that humanity's best effort at genetic modification, soldiers who could go 3 days without sleep and bench press a refrigerator, would impress a species that traveled through black holes for weekend getaways. "All due respect, sir," replied Admiral Xiang, "but based on the ambassador's briefing, sending our super soldiers against their champions would be like entering a knife fight with a particularly aggressive marshmallow." Far from this desperate meeting, in the grimy maintenance level of Orbital Station Gamma 9, Zephyra Kovalski swore colorfully as she wedged herself deeper into the guts of a malfunctioning atmospheric recirculator. Her knuckles bled slightly where they'd scraped against an unexpected bulkhead, and the taste of machine oil hung heavy in the air. The station's ancient infrastructure groaned around her like an old dog settling into an uncomfortable bed. Gamma 9 wasn't the newest or most prestigious assignment in Earth's orbital network. It was a patchwork of 30-year-old tech held together by improvisation, determination, and what Zephyra's crew affectionately called mechanical voodoo. She shifted position, feeling the worn knee pads of her utility jumpsuit catch on a rough edge of the maintenance shaft. The recirculator had chosen the worst possible moment to throw a tantrum, right when the station was hosting a delegation of Martian dignitaries whose respiratory systems were particularly sensitive to fluctuations in oxygen levels. If she didn't get it running in the next 20 minutes, the diplomatic reception would feature the exciting spectacle of gasping, purple-faced ambassadors, not exactly the impression Earth was hoping to make. "Hand me the C-47, she grunted to her assistant. "The what?" came the timid reply. Zephyra sighed with the cosmic weariness of someone who had explained this exact thing 14 times already. "The adjustable compression wrench. The big one with the red handle. The one I've been asking for repeatedly while my organs are being slowly crushed by this death trap." As the wrench was finally placed in her outstretched hand, nobody present could possibly know that this simple tool, this humble instrument of mechanical persuasion, would soon become the most famous implement in galactic history, or that its wielder would become a legend whispered with equal parts reverence and terror throughout the 17 sectors of known space. Zephyra Kovalski had not always been the terror of Orbital Station Gamma 9's engineering department. There had been a time, approximately 27 years earlier, when she had been a quiet, studious child with an unusual aptitude for taking things apart. Unfortunately for her parents' household appliances, putting them back together had come much later in her development. By age 12, she had rebuilt a vintage internal combustion engine from scavenged parts. By 16, she had been kicked out of 3 prestigious technical academies for creative improvements to their facilities. At 34, she had become the most brilliant and most feared mechanical engineer in Earth's orbital infrastructure. "Your problem, Kovalski," her supervisor had told her during her last performance review, "is that you treat machines like they've personally offended you, people like their defective machinery, and regulations like their suggestions written in disappearing ink." Zephyra had taken it as a compliment. What made her legendary among the station crew wasn't just her supernatural ability to fix anything with moving parts. It was her custom-modified compression wrench, a family heirloom passed down from her great-grandmother, who had used it to maintain ancient petroleum refineries. Zephyra had modified it extensively over the years. The handle was wrapped in high-grade Martian leather for grip, the head reinforced with a titanium osmium alloy of her own design, and the adjusting mechanism so precisely calibrated it could grip anything from a micron pin to a coolant manifold. She called it Persuader. Kovalski. The voice of Station Commander Ortiz crackled through her comm unit, startling her enough that she banged her head against the recirculator housing. "Report to Meeting Room Alpha immediately." "Little busy preventing everyone from suffocating, Commander," she replied, tightening a valve with perhaps more force than strictly necessary. "Now, Kovalski, that's an order. And bring your wrench." 43 minutes later, because she finished the repair first, orders be damned, Zephyra stood before a room filled with military brass, diplomats in expensive suits, and a holographic projection of what appeared to be the United Earth President. "Miss Kovalski," began a silver-haired admiral whose chest sparkled with enough medals to constitute a navigation hazard. "How familiar are you with the current Qith'xalanth situation?" Zephyra shrugged. "Big scary aliens, something about a champion, probable extinction. I've been busy fixing the thing that lets you all breathe." "We've reviewed all possible candidates," said a woman in a crisp blue uniform, "and you're our best option." Zephyra blinked twice. "I'm sorry, what?" "The Keltamar is not merely combat," explained a small man with thick glasses and the demeanor of someone who had spent too much time studying alien cultural practices. "It's a series of challenges designed to test problem-solving, adaptation, and technical skill. The Qith'xalanth value technical prowess nearly as much as martial ability." "And you want me to, what, fix their dishwashers while they try to kill me?" "Your service record indicates you once disabled a rogue military drone using only a pocket multi-tool and a container of cafeteria gravy," said Commander Ortiz, reading from a tablet. "That was different. The gravy was exceptionally thick that day." The president's hologram leaned forward. "Ms. Kovalski, I understand this is unexpected, but our analysts give humanity a 3.7% chance of survival if you accept. Without you, it's 0.2%. "Those are terrible odds either way," Zephyra pointed out. "Yes," agreed the president, with the serene calm of someone passing a cosmic death sentence. "But 3.7 is significantly better than 0.2. Zephyra looked down at Persuader, its worn red handle comforting in her grip. "So I'm supposed to fight alien champions with a wrench?" "Our intelligence suggests the Qith'xalanth allow each champion their choice of a single tool or weapon," said the admiral. "And frankly, you're more lethal with that wrench than most of our soldiers are with plasma rifles." "This is insane," Zephyra muttered, "completely insane." "Probably," agreed Commander Ortiz. "But you're all we've got. The shuttle leaves in 3 hours." As Zephyra turned to leave, the cultural expert called after her. "Miss Kovalski, one more thing. The Qith'xalanth consider mechanical aptitude sacred. Their term for engineer roughly translates to one who persuades the soul of metal." Zephyra looked down at her wrench and smiled for the first time. "Well, at least we have that in common." The Qith'xalanth arena ship defied everything Zephyra thought she knew about engineering. It was a massive structure that seemed to violate several laws of physics, with architectural features that made her eyes hurt if she looked at them too long. As the small Earth shuttle approached, she could make out intricate patterns on the hull that shifted and moved like liquid metal. "It's beautiful," whispered Lieutenant Kim, the young officer assigned as her handler. "It's inefficient," Zephyra replied, already spotting at least 17 design flaws in the outer hull alone. Those decorative protrusions add unnecessary drag, and the heat dissipation system is routing through the command structure. Amateur hour. The shuttle docked with a soft pneumatic hiss that made Zephyra wince. Loose seals. They are losing at least 4% atmospheric pressure on every dock. Lieutenant Kim stared at her. We're about to meet aliens who could obliterate our species, and you're critiquing their door seals? Just because they can blow up planets doesn't mean they should waste good air, Zephyra muttered, adjusting her utility belt and making sure Persuader was securely holstered. They were met by creatures that resembled a nightmarish fusion of praying mantis and octopus, with iridescent exoskeletons and multiple limbs that moved with unsettling precision. Their translator devices rendered their clicks and whistles into a mechanical approximation of English. The human champion approaches, announced the tallest of the aliens. Disappointing. We expected something more. Substantial. Zephyra sized up the alien, noting the way its exoskeleton plates overlapped around the joints. Yeah, well, I expected better ventilation design, so I guess we're both having a day. The alien's compound eyes flickered in what might have been surprise. You bring disrespect to the Celtic arm? No, Zephyra replied, patting Persuader. I brought a wrench. The arena itself was a massive dome filled with tiered seating that stretched upward until it disappeared into shadow. Thousands, perhaps millions of alien spectators filled the stands, creating a cacophony of sounds that made Zephyra's ears ring. At the center was a circular platform surrounded by what appeared to be various mechanical obstacles, weapons racks, and technical stations. A voice boomed throughout the arena. Behold, the Grand Kaltuma begins! The human representative will face the champions of the 17 sectors. Survival is unlikely. Entertainment is guaranteed. The crowd roared its approval. Zephyr leaned over to Lieutenant Kim. Did they just say 17 champions? Kim nodded nervously, one from each sector of their empire. Nobody mentioned 17. The briefing just said champions. Plural but non-specific. Would it have changed your mind? Zephyr sighed, gripping Persuader tighter. No, but I would have asked for a sandwich first. The first champion entered the arena to thunderous applause. It was a hulking creature with 4 arms, each ending in what appeared to be natural organic blades. Its head was a cluster of sensory organs with no discernible face, and its movements suggested tremendous strength. Grath'ul of the Morning's Cluster, destroyer of the rebellion of 1,000 suns, announced the voice. Zephyra evaluated her opponent clinically. 4 arms meant 4 joints to exploit. The creature's lower body moved more slowly than its upper torso, suggesting a potential weakness or injury. And most importantly, the seemingly solid exoskeleton had visible maintenance ports, small indentations that likely allowed access to whatever passed for its circulatory or nervous system. Your challenge, boomed the announcer, is combat and repair. You must disable your Oprona, while simultaneously repairing the central calibration unit. A complicated-looking device rose from the center of the arena, clearly malfunctioning as sparks erupted from its casing. Great, muttered Zephyra, multitasking. Grath'ul charged immediately, its bladed arms slashing through the air with frightening speed. Zephyra ducked, rolled, and made a dash for the calibration unit, scanning it quickly as she moved. The design was alien, but physics was universal, and she could recognize a destabilizing harmonic oscillator when she saw one. You're overcomplicated, she told the machine, as she pried open an access panel with one end of Persuader. And you're compensating with brute force instead of efficiency. Just like your friend over there. Grath'ul charged again, and this time Zephyra didn't completely evade. One blade caught her shoulder, tearing through her jumpsuit and drawing blood. The crowd roared its approval. And just like your friend, she continued, adjusting the wrench to fit an odd hexagonal bolt inside the machine, you've got weak points that you think nobody notices. As Grath'ul prepared for another charge, Zephyra grabbed a handful of metallic components from inside the calibration unit. With a quick calculation based on the arena's gravity and the creature's forward momentum, she threw them in a high arc. The alien, distracted by the shiny objects, apparently a universal constant, looked up just long enough for Zephyra to slide between its legs. In one fluid motion, she jammed Persuader into what she hoped was a maintenance port at the base of its spine and gave it a vicious twist. Grath'ul froze mid-motion, its limbs twitching spasmodically. "Sorry, buddy," Zephyra said, returning to the calibration unit. "Just disengaged your motor control cluster. You really should have better security on those access ports." The crowd fell silent as she calmly finished repairing the calibration unit, which hummed back to life with a soft blue glow. Then, unexpectedly, a single alien spectator began making a clicking sound that the translator rendered as applause. Soon others joined, and within moments the entire arena vibrated with it. "Unprecedented," declared the announcer, "the human technician advances." As attendants dragged away the still paralyzed Grath'ul, Zephyra examined her bleeding shoulder with professional detachment. "One down," she muttered, 16 to go, and I didn't even get my sandwich." By the fifth champion, word had spread throughout the arena about the human female with the red wrench. Spectators now chanted what sounded like Zephyra with each entrance, and betting pools had apparently shifted dramatically in her favor. She had defeated a creature made primarily of sentient plasma by reconfiguring its containment field, outmaneuvered a 12-legged hunting beast by creating a feedback loop in its sensory implants, and solved 3 increasingly complex mechanical puzzles while evading attacks from various deadly opponents. The third champion had been particularly memorable, a being composed of crystalline structures that refracted light into disorienting patterns while emitting high-frequency sounds that played havoc with human equilibrium. Zephyra had nearly blacked out before realizing the creature's crystal formations weren't just for show. They were oscillating at specific harmonic frequencies to create the debilitating effects. With a desperate dive and roll, she'd managed to reach a discarded piece of equipment from an earlier challenge, using Persuader to convert it into a crude frequency dampener. The moment she activated it, the crystal being had shattered into thousands of glittering shards, causing the arena to erupt in shocked gasps, followed by thunderous approval. After that victory, she'd noticed alien spectators making strange gestures when she passed, not threatening, but almost reverential. A small group of what appeared to be Qith'xalanth younglings had even tried to touch Persuader when she was being escorted to a brief rest period, their handlers quickly pulling them back with apologetic clicking sounds. Her jumpsuit was torn in 17 places, a nasty gash across her forehead had crusted with dried blood, and her left hand was showing early signs of nerve damage from where she'd blocked a sonic attack. But Persuader remained firmly in her grip, now sporting several new dents and a strange, iridescent stain from the third champion's circulatory fluid. The Emperor himself had taken notice. A massive Qith'xalanth with gold-flecked exoskeleton, he watched from a floating platform high above the arena. "The human shows unexpected skill," he commented to his advisors. "Perhaps their species has potential as vassals rather than cattle." Zephyra, meanwhile, had discovered something interesting during her battles. Each challenge included a technical component, a device to repair, a system to bypass, a puzzle to solve, and each one utilized the same basic technological foundation. There was a pattern to Qith'xalanth engineering, a fundamental principle around which everything was designed. And it had a critical flaw. As she waited for her sixth opponent, she noticed Lieutenant Kim being escorted to the arena edge by guards. "Kovalski," Kim called out, "they're changing the rules. The next 7 champions will attack simultaneously." Before Zephyra could respond, 7 different entry ports opened around the arena perimeter. The crowd's excitement reached fever pitch as creatures of varying sizes and horrifying configurations emerged. "Phase 2 of the Keltamar begins," announced the voice, "the collective challenge." "Well," Zephyra muttered, adjusting her grip on Persuader, "this just got interesting." The 7 champions charged from different directions while a massive central column rose from the arena floor. The column was covered in blinking lights, exposed circuitry, and what appeared to be a countdown timer. "Repair the central column before detonation or face disengagement," boomed the announcer. "Death comes to the slow." Zephyra cursed colorfully as she sprinted toward the column, ducking under the swing of something with tentacles and teeth. The timer showed less than 2 minutes remaining. The design was the most complex she'd seen yet, but still followed the same fundamental principles she'd observed. More importantly, it contained the same critical vulnerability. A flying champion with razor wings dove at her, slicing another gash across her back. Zephyra stumbled but kept moving, reaching the column and immediately locating the primary access panel. With Persuader, she quickly removed it, revealing a chaotic mass of alien circuitry. "You folks really need to learn about cable management," she muttered, reaching deep into the column's innards. Another champion, this one resembling a metallic centipede, launched itself at her legs. Without looking, Zephyra kicked it squarely in what she hoped was a sensitive area, buying herself a few more seconds. The timer showed 30 seconds remaining as Zephyra located what she was looking for, the central harmonic resonator that all Qith'xalanth technology seemed to incorporate. Unlike the others she'd encountered, this one was designed to deliberately fail, creating a cascading energy release. "Predictable," she whispered, jamming Persuader into position and making a precise adjustment to the resonator's timing crystal. The effect was immediate. The countdown froze, the lights flickered, and for a brief moment, everything electronic in the arena stuttered, including, as Zephyra had suspected, the cybernetic implants that all the champions appeared to rely on. As the 7 creatures momentarily faltered, Zephyra spun the wrench with practiced precision, adjusting the resonator from imminent failure to catastrophic feedback loop. Then she rolled away from the column and covered her ears. The pulse that emanated from the device wasn't visible, but its effects were immediate. All 7 champions collapsed simultaneously, their implants fried by the precisely tuned resonance wave. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Emperor's platform seemed to hover motionless in shock. Then, Lieutenant Kim's voice broke the quiet. Did you just create an EMP specifically calibrated to their technology?" Zephyra shrugged, wincing as the motion pulled at her various injuries. "Their entire technological base relies on harmonic resonance principles. Once you understand the frequency, you can disrupt it. Basic engineering." The stillness shattered as the arena erupted in what the translator rendered as equal parts outrage and astonished admiration. The Emperor's platform descended rapidly to hover just above the arena floor. "You have violated the spirit of the Kel'Thuzad," his amplified voice accused. Zephyra looked up at him, Persuader still gripped tightly in her bloodied hand. "You said, repair the column before detonation. I repaired it. Not my fault your champions had a design vulnerability." For what seemed like an eternity, the Emperor's compound eyes studied her. Then, incredibly, his translator rendered something that sounded almost like laughter. "The human speaks truth. The challenge was met, though by unexpected means." He gestured to the fallen champions. "However, the final trial cannot be circumvented. Prepare yourself, human Zephyra, for the Imperial Champion." The far wall of the arena began to retract, revealing darkness beyond. The crowd's excitement reached new heights as something massive began to move in the shadows. "I'm going to need a bigger wrench," Zephyra muttered. The Imperial Champion was everything the others were not. Where they had been biological organisms enhanced with technology, this was technology given terrible life. Standing 3 times Zephyra's height, its form resembled a humanoid shape constructed of shifting metal plates, pulsing energy conduits, and weapons that defied Earth classification. Its head was a cluster of sensors surrounding a central crystal that glowed with ominous purpose. "Behold Annihilator, the Emperor's own creation." The announcer's voice had taken on a reverential tone. 17 worlds have fallen before it. No challenger has survived longer than 7 minutes. "Wonderful," Zephyra said, casting about for any advantage in the now empty arena. All debris had been cleared, all fallen champions removed. It was just her, Persuader, and a 3-story tall death machine. "The final challenge is simple," announced the Emperor. "Survive." Annihilator moved with impossible speed for something so large. Before Zephyra could properly react, a massive appendage slammed into the ground where she had been standing. Only pure instinct had saved her, throwing her body sideways in a roll that sent waves of pain through her injured shoulder. She scrambled behind a small protrusion in the arena floor, mind racing. The machine was fast, powerful, and presumably immune to the resonance trick she'd used earlier. The glowing crystal at its center seemed important, perhaps a power source or control node, but it was far beyond her reach. Annihilator's arm reconfigured into what was unmistakably a weapon, and energy gathered at its tip. Zephyra barely escaped the blast that followed, the heat so intense it singed her hair and left the arena floor glowing where it struck. "Impressive evasion," the Emperor commented, "but futile." Zephyra wasn't listening. She was watching the machine's movements, analyzing its configuration. Unlike the other technology she'd encountered, Annihilator seemed to incorporate multiple redundant systems. Disabling one would trigger a backup. It was well designed, but not perfect. Every time it reconfigured, there was a moment, less than a second, where power fluctuated through its systems. The crystal dimmed slightly, then brightened. A pattern was emerging. "The harmonic principle is still there," she whispered to herself, "just hidden under layers of protection." Another blast, another desperate evasion. This time she wasn't quite fast enough. The energy caught her leg and she screamed as pain seared through her calf. The smell of burned flesh filled her nostrils as she collapsed behind another small barrier. The crowd was chanting something new now. The translator rendered it as "finish it." Zephyra looked down at Persuader, its familiar weight suddenly seeming inadequate against such a monstrosity. Then she noticed something. A slight discoloration on the wrench's adjustable head where it had contacted the central column during her previous challenge. An idea formed, desperate, probably suicidal, but the only option left. Gritting her teeth against the pain, she forced herself to stand on her injured leg. "Hey, scrap heap," she shouted. "Is that the best you've got?" Annihilator's sensors focused on her, and its weapon arm began to reconfigure again, this time into something even larger. As it did, Zephyra noted the power fluctuation, the momentary dimming of the crystal. With every ounce of strength remaining, she threw Persuader. The wrench spun through the air, its trajectory perfect, not toward the crystal as spectators might have expected, but toward a small gap in the plating that appeared briefly during reconfiguration, a gap that exposed, for less than a second, what Zephyra recognized as a resonance stabilizer. Persuader, its head still carrying particles from the central column's harmonic resonator, struck precisely where she'd aimed. The contact created exactly what she'd hoped for, a catastrophic harmonic disruption at the machine's core frequency. The effect wasn't immediate. For 2 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, Annihilator froze mid-motion. A high-pitched whine emanated from its core, growing rapidly in intensity. The crystal pulsed erratically, shifting through colors at increasing speed. "System failure detected," came a mechanical voice from within the behemoth. "Harmonic destabilization in progress. Critical overload imminent." The Emperor's voice cut through the arena. "Evacuate, it's going to." The explosion that followed wasn't the destructive blast everyone expected. Instead, Annihilator seemed to implode, its components collapsing inward around the destabilized core. What remained was a smoking heap of twisted metal, with Persuader somehow intact, resting atop the pile. The silence that followed was absolute. Zephyra limped forward, retrieving her wrench from the ruins. She turned to face the Emperor's platform, now surrounded by guards in defensive positions. "I survived," she said simply, her voice carrying in the silent arena. "That was the challenge, right? And so it came to pass, younglings, that the fate of Earth was decided not by mighty weapons or grand fleets, but by a single human female with a tool of common metal. The Emperor, in his wisdom, recognized in Zephyra Kovalski something the Empire had lost: innovation born of necessity, ingenuity unfettered by convention. The treaty signed that day granted Earth not just survival, but partnership. In exchange for technical knowledge, particularly regarding harmonics and resonance, humans would remain free of imperial rule. Zephyra Kovalski returned to Earth a reluctant hero. They say she refused all medals and honors, requesting only a fully equipped workshop where she could work in peace. The stories claim she spent her remaining years improving Earth's technology based on what she had learned from the Qith'xalanth, creating the foundation for the human renaissance that would eventually lead to our own star-spanning civilization. As for the legendary wrench called Persuader, some say it rests in a museum on old Earth, while others insist it was buried with its owner when she finally passed beyond the veil. But the wisest among us believe it was passed to a worthy successor, and that even now, somewhere among the stars, a human engineer carries on the tradition of solving impossible problems with simple tools and stubborn determination. Remember this tale when you face your own challenges, younglings, for the universe bends not to those with the greatest strength, but to those who understand its workings and have the courage to apply that knowledge. And perhaps most importantly, never underestimate the power of a well-placed wrench. There is one more detail rarely shared in the official tellings. Before returning to Earth, Zephyra reportedly had one final audience with the Emperor. The records of their conversation were sealed, but it said she explained why humans had advanced so quickly despite their limitations. Necessity, she told him, is the mother of innovation. When you can't overpower a problem, you must outsmart it. This is humanity's greatest strength, not our technology, but our stubborn refusal to accept impossibility. The Emperor, in his wisdom, is said to have recognized the wisdom in her words. Perhaps that is why, even today, the Empire approaches human territories with cautious respect. Not because they fear our weapons or our numbers, but because they understand that a species that could produce a Zephyra Kovalski might produce more of her kind. Problem solvers who see not obstacles, but puzzles waiting for the right application of pressure. Now sleep, little ones. The stars await your dreams, and tomorrow's challenges await your wrench.